you used to work with Kevin, who primarily represented actors. It sounds like now you're working mainly in the literary realm, if I'm correct with that, directors and such. Um, what's the big differences in representing both of those sort of categories and segments of talent that you notice, and how have you had to adjust? How have you had to adjust, and what skill sets are required for each one of those sort of different segments of representing those groups?
Yeah, sure. I mean, when I made the move, Kevin Volchuk looked me in the eye and he goes, "It's the same job, kid. It's the same job." And I think from like a 10,000 foot view, like it very much is the same job. You're in motion picture talent. You have usually a roster of actors, which is most agents have sort of like a top 10, which is sort of there's like they're developed movie stars, which is sort of the majority of the business and the majority of their time. And then you sort of have like mid-tier kind of like names, like talent that may move the needle in terms of like packaging, and Abe can speak to that, more thoroughly later. And then you have like developmental clients. Um, and really the way it works is you have like a studio or an independent producer saying like, these are the 5 projects that we're casting for right now. Here are the breakdowns of the roles. Send us who you think is going to be a great fit for these roles. And the same thing applies on sort of like the literary and the director end of things. Warner Brothers will come out and say, okay, we're doing Sonic 3. Who are your big name directors that do you think would be like a good fit for like Sonic the Hedgehog 3? Or, they might be looking for more of like a mid-tier sort of like horror director, in which case we would send them horror writers. And so in terms of the way that it flows, it's very, very similar, but it's very different. I think from like an energy perspective, in talent, I always found that, you're trying to fight for that next job. You're always trying to like push people to get an audition or like get them in the room. Whereas on the lit and the directing side, the nice thing is once a movie is kind of in flow, everyone around that film is really trying to find the way forward, including the people like on the studio end. So I would say on the literary and the director end, there's more moves to be made strategically should a piece of talent fall out, or should a director not work out, or should, like in the independent space, should financing fall through. There are other options available to keep that project moving forward. Whereas in the talent space, it's very sort of A B. It's very like you got the role or you didn't get the role. Um, Unless you're working from a very like high level perspective, in which
Right.
case we're like packaging ahead of time, and then the conversation is more like who's going to look really great across from like Chris Pratt, or
Exactly.
like does Zach
Yeah.
Galifianakis like this script?
Well, and I'm sure that has to do a lot with IP too, right? Because if you have a primarily IP driven piece, like something like Sonic 3, that's moving forward probably with or without the director. But if for pretty much, you guys will correct me if I'm wrong, but for pretty much anything else, the director is the sell. And so it's probably a bit easier, like or you have more options in terms of like, if a studio is committed to a project and a director is on a project, the director is the project. Whereas if it's IP, the IP can move forward with or without that director. Does that kind of make sense what I'm saying? So does it depend on sort of what the material is, and that sort of flexibility? Does that make sense what I'm saying, Christian? Or
Yeah, absolutely. I think if anything that a studio is opening up what's called like an open directing forum for, is that project is moving forward like with or without that specific director. They need a director for that project, so that project's moving forward. Like Fast and the Furious 13 is moving forward regardless of, the director. Whereas if you get someone you know like Ty West or like an Ari Aster, and they have a vision for a movie that they want to make, they are that movie.